For 10,000 galactic cycles, a High Council of 12 had governed the Orion Arm in serene, unbroken harmony. 11 seats were always filled, representing the eldest and most powerful civilizations known, the crystalline lore, the hive-minded Zenth, the aquatic Velm, and others whose names were synonymous with cosmic order. The 12th seat, carved from a single piece of obsidian older than the council itself, remained empty. It was reserved for a species from a small, turbulent world designated Sol 3, a species that had, according to ancient treaty, earned the right to sit among them. But they had never come. For millennia, the council assumed the humans had simply destroyed themselves, as primitive species so often did. It was a quiet, polite assumption, a minor mystery gathering dust in the archives. Today, that assumption would shatter. Today, a single, unauthorized, and terrifyingly primitive transmission would bleed into the council's sanctum, not from a human diplomat, but from a human battlefield. And, as the translated words echoed in the silent, vaulted chamber, as the visual data resolved into a scene of impossible defiance, the 11 most powerful beings in the galaxy would feel something they had forgotten over eons of serene rule, a primal, chilling fear. For the humans had not died quietly. They had been busy. And the vacancy of their seat was not a sign of their absence, but of their profound, galaxy-altering occupation. Part 1. The air in the council chamber was, as always, perfectly still, scented with the subtle pheromones of calm and the ozone of advanced technology. High Arbiter Valerius of the lore, his crystalline form refracting the soft ambient light into gentle rainbows on the polished floor, called the session to order. The other 10 representatives manifested their presence, holographic projections of immense clarity for those light-years distant, physical forms for those residing on the council world. The Zenth Collective's envoy was a single, chitinous node, its consciousness a fragment of a billionfold mind. The Veln ambassador floated in its contained aquatic sphere, bioluminescent patterns flickering with formal greetings. The day's agenda was benign, minor trade route adjustments for the Krillix hegemony, a scholarly debate on the ethical pruning of a rogue nebula's phototropic fungi. It was governance as ritual, peace as a perpetual, gentle hum. As the Krillix delegate droned on about tariff codes, Ambassador Kthar of the predatory but fiercely honorable Gelt Republic let his secondary eyes wander, as they often did, to the empty 12th seat. It was a stark, dark blot in the symmetrical beauty of the chamber. A relic of sentimentality, the Zenth node buzzed privately to Valerius on a secured channel. The treaty is archaic. The species is statistically extinct. We should reclaim the space. Perhaps for a decorative fountain. Valerius's light pattern shimmered with mild reproach. The compact of first contact is the foundation of our law, Zenth. Their seat remains until evidence of extinction is conclusive. The silence from Sol 3 is noted, but not definitive. It has been 10,000 cycles, the Zenth replied. Their star system shows only primitive electromagnetic chatter, then, a great silence. Conclusion, self-termination. A common flaw in nascent tool users. The discussion moved on. As the Arbiter prepared to adjourn for the mid-cycle refreshment, the chamber's primary communication array, a system designed to receive only the most sanitized, formally encrypted diplomatic packets from member worlds, gave a sudden, violent shudder. A raw, screeching wave of uncontrolled analog data, broadcast on a shockingly primitive frequency band, erupted from the main holosphere. Lights flickered. The Veln ambassador recoiled, its water clouding. A harsh, static-laden visual resolved, grainy, panicked, streaked with data corruption. It showed a landscape of shattered magenta rock under a binary star system's violent light. The perspective was from a helmet cam, jostling wildly. Alien screams, not of fear, but of furious challenge, filled the audio. They were guttural, sharp, belonging to no species on the council registry. A voice, speaking in a human language tagged as Anglic, shouted, thick with strain and the roar of nearby explosions. Falling back to the choke point. Craxy heavies are breaching the eastern ridge. Where in hell's name is our orbital support? A second voice, crackling with calm's distortion, responded. Orbital is gone, Sergeant. The Beijing and the Churchill are dust. It's just us dirt side. Command says hold the line. The Civi evac from Outpost Gamma is not clear. The camera swung, showing a nightmarish scene. Hulking, four-armed reptilian creatures, Craxi, the data tag supplied advanced using plasma casters, their shells deflecting small arms fire. Among the magenta rocks, figures in bulky, scarred armor moved with desperate grace. Humans. They were impossibly outnumbered, their technology looking laughably crude, projectile weapons emitting chemical propellant thunder, missile launchers that seemed to be little more than metal tubes. Hold the line? With what? Spitballs and hope, the sergeant snarled. But he was already moving, rallying his handful of soldiers. All right, you beautiful bastards. You heard the man. We hold. Not for command, not for the flag, but for the 30,000 souls waiting on those last shuttles. On my signal, concentrated fire on the lead heavy. Aim for the leg joints. Let's see how he dances. What followed was a 3-minute and 47-second masterclass in asymmetrical, brutal defiance. The humans didn't fight like any civilized species. They didn't attempt to parley, to withdraw with honor, to calculate acceptable losses. They fought with a terrifying, wasteful ferocity. They used the terrain, setting off pre-planted charges that brought down cliffs on the attackers. They fired until their weapons overheated, then used them as clubs. One human, limbs severed by plasma, crawled to a cluster of grenades and detonated them as Craxi warriors overran his position. The sergeant became the focal point. His armor was breached, his faceplate cracked, showing a bloodied, gritted face beneath. He never stopped. He directed, he taunted, he killed. When a Craxi heavy got within 10 meters, he charged it, leaping onto its carapace and jamming a vibrating combat knife into a visual sensor, righting the creature as it flailed wildly. The transmission's final moments were the most chilling. The camera was on the ground, pointed upward at the magenta sky. The sergeant's helmet was nearby, his breathing ragged. The sounds of battle were dying, replaced by the triumphant shrieks of the Craxi. A shadow fell over him, a Craxi warrior, its weapon raised for the killing blow. The sergeant's bloodied face appeared in the frame, looking not at his killer, but directly into the camera. He grinned, a stark white slash of teeth and a mask of grime and blood. He said, his voice clear and carrying a weight that silenced the chamber more completely than any arbiter's command, "Tell Earth, we held. And tell the Council, their seats still waiting. But the rent's getting damn expensive." The Craxi warrior brought its weapon down. The feed dissolved into pixelated snow, then cut to black. Silence. Profound, absolute, consuming silence. In 10,000 cycles, the council chamber had never witnessed such a thing. Violence was a thing of historical record, of clinical analysis. Not raw, intimate, and screaming with purpose. The Zenth node was the first to break the silence, its usual monotone buzzing with uncharacteristic processing strain. That was a class death world predation event. The physiological output, the adrenaline cascade, the cognitive disregard for self-preservation, it is off the scale. The Veln's bioluminescence was pulsing frantic, panicked colors. They were being slaughtered. Why did they not surrender? Their tactical position was untenable. Kthar of the Gelt, whose species revered combat skill, found his primary hearts pounding in a rhythm of ancient, forgotten awe. They sold their lives, to buy time. For Civi Evac. Non-combatants. Arbiter Valerius felt fractures, tiny and hairline, propagating through his crystalline thought core. The serene assumptions of a lifetime were crumbling. The humans were not extinct. They were here, in the galaxy, fighting a war no one knew existed. Their technology was primitive, yes. But their will was a coruscating, primal force that made the elegant logic of the council seem frail. The transmission origin, Valerius managed, his light patterns flickering erratically. The chamber's AI responded, its voice toneless. Source triangulated. Origin point is the Perseus Fringe, beyond the council's mapped territories. Signal is a broadband, low-tech distress/morale beacon, repeating on a loop. It has been broadcasting for approximately 7.2 galactic standard cycles. 7 cycles. For 7 cycles, this testament to a desperate, losing battle had been screaming into the void, and the civilized galaxy had heard nothing. Valerius looked at the empty obsidian seat. It no longer looked like a monument to a dead species. It looked like a throne. And the beings who had earned it were not silent because they were gone. They were silent because they were too busy fighting a war in the dark, a war for a city evac, with spitballs and hope and a willingness to die grinning. This council, Valerius said, his voice resonating with a new, hard frequency, is now an emergency session. We must understand. The word felt inadequate. They needed to comprehend the storm that had just burst into their serene garden. And, for the first time, the High Arbiter of the lore felt a tremor deep within his planet's core, a sympathetic vibration to a distant, human explosion. Part 2. The emergency session stretched into a tense, sleepless cycle. The Council's vast intelligence networks, usually focused on economic forecasts and philosophical discourse, were now laser-targeted on the Perseus Fringe and the historical enigma of Sol 3. What they uncovered was not a history, but a burial ground of ignored data, a tapestry of whispers they had mistaken for silence. Astronomical logs showed not a quiet system, but one that had gone deliberately dark. Roughly 12,000 cycles ago, around the time humanity would have been eligible for their council seat, Sol 3's burgeoning electromagnetic signals had not faded into nothing. They had been intentionally compressed, encrypted, and then directed into tight beam lasers aimed at nowhere the council monitored. The planet had not gone silent, it had stopped broadcasting on frequencies anyone was listening to. Deep-range passive scanners, reprocessed with new parameters, revealed a different story. Traces of warp transitions, not the clean, energy-efficient signatures of council drives, but brutal, space-time ripping events that left nasty gravitational scars. These tunnel drives were hideously wasteful, terrifyingly powerful, and charted courses straight into the uncharted, violent arms of the galaxy. The timelines matched a series of cataclysmic, unexplained gamma-ray bursts the Council's astrophysicists had catalogued as natural phenomena. They were not natural. They were exit wounds. They did not come to claim their seat, the Zenth node concluded, its buzzing edged with a new, wary respect, because they were expanding in a direction we considered void of value. Into the galactic wilderness. Into contested territory. The word contested was a council euphemism for hellscapes inhabited by species too savage, too irrational, or too biologically hazardous for inclusion in civilized society. Species like the Kraxi. A deep-covered Gelt intelligence operative, embedded with a mercenary guild that sometimes traded in the fringe, provided the next piece. The data was delivered via secure quantum packet, a first-hand account that painted a picture far grander and more terrible than a single lost battle. The humans, the Gelt operative reported, his image disguised, don't have an empire. They don't have a unified government we can recognize. They have something they call the human diaspora. Thousands of colony ships, generation arcs, corporate ventures, and warships. They left Sol system not for conquest, but for room. They encountered the Kraxi hegemony, a expansionist death world species, roughly 900 cycles ago. The Kraxi saw them as prey. It was a catastrophic misjudgment. The operative transmitted fragmented battle records, gleaned from black market dealers and the wreckage fields. They showed human vessels ungainly, armored like bricks, lacking energy shields, taking direct hits that would vaporize a council cruiser, and keeping on fighting, their interior compartments sealed off, their crews operating in vacuum, their weapons firing back with sheer kinetic fury. They showed human soldiers, not just one uniformed force, but a dizzying array of factions with different insignias fighting on 100 different nightmarish worlds. Not just Kraxi. There were the silicon-based, planet-devouring myrmidons. The psionic energy vampires, the Lament. A dozen other horrors the Council had only known as existential threats contained to the fringe. The humans, the operative said, are cutting through as professional detachment. They don't fight to achieve political goals. They fight for survival, and for each other. They call it holding the line. Their entire diaspora is a series of interlinked, fortified lines. And their most sacred law, their prime directive, is a brutal simplicity: no human left behind. They will spend 1,000 lives, a fleet, a planet's worth of resources, to recover a single captured soldier or a colony of civilians. The Kraxi used to take prisoners. They don't anymore. It provokes a disproportionate response. Ambassador Kthar watched a grainy vid of a human dropship, smoking and on fire, deliberately crashing into a Craxi hive spire to extract a pinned-down squad. The math was insane. The cost-benefit analysis was non-existent. The honor of it made his Gelt's soul sing. The Veln were horrified. This is madness. Their resource allocation is pathological. They are bleeding themselves dry for sentiment. Are they? Arbiter Valerius asked quietly. He called up a strategic overlay, compiled from the fragmentary data. It was not a map of an empire. It was a map of a war. A vast, sprawling, multi-front war against the galaxy's most vicious predators. The human diaspora was not a sphere of influence, it was a barrier. A bloody, grinding, stubborn wall of flesh and primitive metal holding back a tide of horrors that, if the timelines were correct, would have begun spilling into Council space centuries ago. The Craxi, the Myrmidons, the Lament, their expansion vectors had all been aimed coreward, toward the rich, peaceful worlds of the Council. And then, roughly 900 cycles ago, those vectors had stopped, had been turned, had become a chaotic storm of conflict in the fringe. The humans, in their absence, had not just been fighting. They had been standing guard. For 10,000 cycles, the Council had enjoyed peace, art, philosophy, and gentle commerce, believing it was the natural order maintained by their wise governance. They had built their utopia on a foundation they didn't know existed, a foundation of human bones and stubborn rage, holding up the floor of the galaxy. The obsidian seat no longer felt like a throne. It felt like a monument to a colossal, unpaid debt. A debt written in blood. We must make contact, the Zenth node buzzed, its logic circuits grappling with the concept of a sacrificial guardian species. We must offer assistance. Our technology, our medicine, our fleet logistics, we can turn the tide for them. We can bring them into the fold, finally, fill the vacant seat. A new voice entered the chamber, not via the official channels, but as a brute force override on the same primitive frequency as the battlefield transmission. It was a human voice, female, laced with static and a fatigue that seemed etched into the very atoms of the signal. Council of 12. This is Admiral Lyra Revna of the Diaspora Vanguard Fleet. We intercepted your data probes. Stop. Do not send ships. Do not send aid. Do not acknowledge this transmission. The shock was palpable. They had been detected. Admiral Revna's voice was iron, worn thin but unbroken. Your technology is a beacon. Your diplomacy is a chain. Your assistance would reveal the precise location and strength of every human world to the Craxi and the Myrmidon Scourge. They would bypass our lines and fall upon you. You are not warriors. You are victims waiting to happen. Your peace is a weapon you do not know how to hold. She took a ragged breath. The sound of distant alarms bled through. The seat is vacant because we are busy. We are the dam. You are the city behind it. You don't thank the dam. You don't send the dam nice messages. You just hope to the stars it holds. Now, for your own safety, and ours, stay silent. Stay out. Let us work. Revna out. The connection died. The Council was left in a silence more profound than before. They were not just observers. They were, in the human admiral's chilling assessment, the protected. The helpless. The reason for the sacrifice. And the dam was asking them, with exhausted finality, to just sit still and enjoy the water. Arbiter Valerius looked at his fellow council members, the brilliant philosophers, the master economists, the serene rulers. They were children, being shielded from a storm by a grim, bloodied older sibling who wanted nothing from them but their continued ignorance. The quaking in the chamber was no longer metaphorical. A deep, subsonic tremor ran through the planet's crust, a geological anomaly. But, in their souls, the Council felt the true quake, the seismic shift of their understanding of the universe, and their pitifully small place within it. The vacant seat was a judgment upon them all. Part 3 Admiral Revna's warning was a stone dropped into the still pond of Council consciousness, and the ripples were tsunamis of doubt, fear, and fracturing pride. The Gelt, represented by Kthar, were the first to break ranks openly. We are not children to be patted on the head and told to stay in our room. Kthar's roar echoed in his private enclave, a room adorned with the trophies of his species' martial past. He addressed a secret convocation of his military advisors. These humans fight with honor we have only sung of in our oldest sagas. They stand against the very darkness our ancient shamans warned of. And we are to sit, polishing our tables, while they bleed? This is not protection. It is a cage of our own making. His sentiment found a volatile echo in the younger, more aggressive members of other species. The Zenth collective, however, was divided. The majority hive mind saw the cold logic in Revna's warning. But isolated nodes, those with greater individual autonomy, began running simulations. The results were unsettling. Projecting Council fleet engagements against Craxi or Myrmidon tactics showed catastrophic losses. Their ships were designed for show of force and, precise, minimal damage engagements. They were dazzling dueling rapiers facing off against armored, nuclear sledgehammers. Meanwhile, Arbiter Valerius, haunted by the image of the grinning sergeant, authorized a clandestine, desperate project. Using the Council's immense resources, but avoiding any active transmission that could be detected, they would attempt a deep listen, a passive, galaxy-wide analysis of every scrap of energy, every ripple in spacetime, to map the true scale of the human diaspora's war. What they assembled, over weeks of silent, terrified observation, was not a map, but a diagnosis of a dying body. The human defensive lines were not just holding, they were collapsing, in slow motion, across a front of unimaginable length. They found the ghost of a human colony world, now a silent, radioactive tomb, its surface scarred by Craxi orbital bombardment. They detected the fading heat signatures of a massive fleet engagement near a nebula the humans called the Anvil, a battle where the last transmission from a human flagship, the Kratos, was just 3 words: burn with us. Then, thermonuclear silence. They pinpointed the source of Admiral Revna's transmission, a heavily fortified star system designated in human logs as the Bulwark. It was the linchpin, the final major defensive array before the more scattered, inner worlds of the diaspora. And, sensor ghosts showed it was surrounded, besieged by a combined Craxi Myrmidon force of staggering size. The Bulwark was not just a fortification, it was a trap about to be sprung. The humans there weren't a dam, they were the cork in a bottle, and the pressure was building to a universe-shattering degree. The final piece of data was the most intimate, and the most devastating. A lone, derelict human scout vessel, its tunnel drive dead, was found drifting just inside Council sensor range. A Gelt salvage team, defying orders, retrieved it. Inside its frozen, airless husk, they found a single data core, intact. It was the personal log of the ship's commander, a Captain Elias Vance. The Council viewed it in hushed, collective dread. Captain Vance's face was drawn, his eyes hollow with a fatigue that went beyond the physical. He spoke not of tactics, but of truth. Cycle 842 of the Siege of Cygnus Prime, he began, his voice a dry whisper. Rations are at 12%. Ammunition reserves critical. The Craxi have broken the orbital yards. We're manufacturing missiles in school gymnasiums now. The children, they worked the assembly lines between lessons on ballistics and first aid. He looked directly into the recorder, as if seeing the future Council audience. You out there, in your quiet, lighted galaxy. I know you're listening now. You finally heard the screams. Don't feel guilty. Your peace was the point. My great-great-grandfather was on the committee that voted to go dark, to not claim the Council seat. He said, we're a species of sharp edges. We'd tear their beautiful tapestry just by sitting down at the table. Better to be the wall that keeps the wind off their garden. We were arrogant too, I think. We thought we could handle the wind. He coughed, a dry, wrenching sound. Turns out, the wind never stops. And, the wall gets tired. The Bulwark, it's our last, best trick. But, it's not enough. We've calculated the enemy's resource expenditure. They're committing everything. When they take the Bulwark, the road to our core worlds is open. And, after that, it's a straight shot to yours. Vance leaned forward, his gaze becoming terrifyingly intense. So here is the truth you must accept, you peaceful, gentle beings. We are going to lose. Not a battle. The war. In perhaps 50 cycles, maybe less, the Bulwark will fall. The flood you have been shielded from for 10 millennia will be unleashed. And it will drown you. Your technology, your culture, your history, it will be ash, or worse, turned into weapons against you. He offered a ghost of a smile, a faint echo of the sergeant's defiance. Our seat is vacant because we are all standing at the wall. And the wall is about to break. The only question left is what you will do when the wind finally reaches your garden. Will you die polite? Or will you, for the first time in your long, serene lives, learn how to roar? The log ended. The derelict scout ship and the ghost of Captain Vance seemed to hang in the air of the council chamber. The illusion was utterly destroyed. The humans were not invincible guardians. They were a doomed rearguard, buying the galaxy its last moments of peace with their extinction. Panic, cold and rational, set in. The Zenth hive mind calculated survival probabilities. They were near zero. The Velm proposed a great exodus, a desperate flight to another galactic cluster, a plan that was logistically impossible. It was Kthar of the Gelt who stood, his form rigid with a resolve forged in the fires of this new, horrible knowledge. We have spent our time analyzing our helplessness. The humans spent their time, even in defeat, teaching us. They showed us the enemy. They showed us our weakness. And Captain Vance has given us our final lesson, how to face the end. He turned to the obsidian seat. It was no longer a judgment, but a call to arms. They do not ask for our help. They believe us incapable of it. But they are wrong. We are not warriors, yet. But we are engineers. We are scientists. We are builders on a scale they, fighting for every scrap, could never be. We have 50 cycles. We will not spend them weeping. A grim, unified purpose, born of sheer survival instinct, crystallized in the chamber. The great project was born. Not to send ships to the bulwark, that would be suicide. But to build something new. To take the serene, beautiful, and immensely powerful technology of a peace-loving galaxy, and to reforge it, with brutal, desperate haste, into a weapon worthy of a human's last stand. They would not try to be the dam. They would become the deluge. The quaking in the council world was no longer a passive reaction. It was the first, deep, seismic thrum of industry. Of forges being lit. Of a galaxy waking up, terrified, from a 10,000-year dream, and deciding, at last, to fight for its right to dream again. Part 450 Cycles. A heartbeat in galactic time. For the High Council, it became an age of fire and fury, a forced evolution compressed into a single, desperate generation. The serene gardens and contemplation spires of the council world were overshadowed by monolithic shipyards that blotted out the sun. The gentle hum of commerce was drowned by the relentless, planet-shaking thunder of mass driver tests and shield harmonic calibrations. They did not try to mimic humanity. Their biology, their psychology, was different. Instead, they weaponized their own essence. The lore crystalline engineers, masters of elegant energy manipulation, designed resonance lances, weapons that didn't blast, but tuned themselves to the molecular frequency of a target and induced catastrophic harmonic disintegration. Beautiful, and horrifyingly efficient. The Zenth Collective, its hive mind operating at a wartime consensus pace that bordered on insanity, became the galaxy's most terrifying tactical computer. They didn't just plot fleet movements, they simulated entire battles, accounting for variables down to the emotional fatigue of individual crew members, seeking not victory, but optimal sacrificial delay. The aquatic Veln, experts in biosphere engineering, turned their skills to a new purpose, creating hyperspace-capable thorn pods, organic minds that mimicked the psychic signature of a wounded starship, luring in predatory species like the Lament before detonating with a psychic feedback loop that boiled their neural clusters. Thar and the Gelt oversaw it all, their innate warrior culture providing the harsh, driving spirit. They scrapped generations of diplomatic vessels, melting down graceful hulls to forge armor plating 10 meters thick. They studied every fragment of human battle data, not to copy their tactics, but to understand the enemies. They learned the Craxy's reliance on close-quarters boarding actions, the Myrmidon's instinct to swarm the largest energy signature. What they built was not a fleet. It was a single, galaxy-spanning weapon system, designated Project Custodian. Its core was not a warship, but a mobile, fortress-sized factory and command node, the Arbiter's Will. Around it, they assembled ships of grotesque, purposeful power, the Gelt's Vengeance, a brawler-class planetoid cracker, the Zenth Calculated Risk, a carrier for swarms of AI-piloted suicide drones, the Velen's Deceit, a stealth-adapted plague ship. They worked in absolute radio silence, a total emission blackout more complete than anything humanity had achieved. The only signal sent into the void was a single, tight beam, quantum-entangled pulse towards the last known location of the bulwark. It contained no words, only a complex data package, schematics, tactical analyses of Craxi/Myrmidon vulnerabilities, and a single, repeating symbol, a stylized obsidian seat, now cracked down the middle, with a lore crystal, a Gelt claw, a Zenth node, and a Velen wave joined together in its center. It was an offer. A statement. A promise. On the bridge of the Arbiter's Will, now leading our armada of 500 capital ships and thousands of support vessels, Arbiter Valerius watched the countdown to their calculated emergence point at the bulwark. His crystalline form was marred by stress fractures, hastily repaired with battle-grade bonding agents. He no longer refracted gentle light, he glowed with the harsh, blue-white intensity of a focused laser. "We have changed everything we are," he said to Kthar, who stood beside him, clad in scarred, functional combat armor. "We have become the very thing we abhorred for eons. Violence, incarnate." Kthar growled, the sound one of grim satisfaction. "No, Arbiter. We have finally become what we always had the potential to be, adults. The humans were the parents, taking the blows on the doorstep so we could grow up safe. The door is breaking. It is time for the children to pick up the tools." The tunnel drive engaged. It was not the brutal, space-time rending tear of a human drive, but a smoother, yet somehow more profound, folding of reality. The serene technology of peace, bent to the task of delivering war. They emerged into hell. The bulwark system was a charnel house. The binary stars were occluded by the drifting debris of shattered warships, blocky human dreadnoughts burning silently next to Craxi hiveships leaking green plasma. The space around the massive, fortress-like station that was the bulwark itself churned with violence. Human fighters, agile and desperate, weaved through waves of Craxi skirmishers. Myrmidon swarms, like clouds of crystalline locusts, ate away at the station's shields. On the main viewer, they saw the human fleet. It was a pitiful remnant, ships battered, listing, spewing atmosphere, yet still moving, still firing, forming a ragged, defiant sphere around the station's primary docking rings. And there, at the heart of it, was a ship they recognized from the intercepted data, Admiral Revna's flagship, the Diaspora's Fist. Its forward section was a mangled wreck, but its engines still burned. A Craxi world killer, a behemoth of jagged bone and metal, was moving into point-blank range of the Fist, its primary bore cannon charging to finish the job. There was no time for grand speeches, for careful deployment. The Council had theorized, simulated, prepared. Now, they had to fight. "All vessels," Valerius commanded, his voice resonating through the fleet-wide comm, "by the compact we failed, by the seat left vacant, by the debt unpaid, engage. Save that ship." The custodian fleet did not attack like humans. They did not scream in. They unfolded. Resonance lances from the lore vessels reached out, silent and invisible. The Craxi world killer's stern section simply shimmered, then dissolved into a cloud of disassociated atoms, its bore cannon firing wildly into empty space as the ship broke apart. Zenth calculated drone swarms flooded into the Myrmidon clouds, not exploding, but latching on and emitting disruptive energy fields that caused the swarm organisms to attack each other in mindless frenzy. Gelt brawlers, engines screaming, plowed into the Craxi battle lines, their heavy kinetic batteries firing at a rate that would have shredded their own hulls weeks before. Now, they held their new armor-absorbing punishing blows. A stunned, static-filled human transmission bled onto the bridge of the Arbiter's Will. It was Admiral Revna, her voice shattered by disbelief and a frail, impossible hope. "Unidentified fleet, identify yourselves." What in God's name are you?" Valerius opened a channel. He looked at the visual of Revna, exhausted, wounded, but unbroken, and then, at the image of the empty obsidian seat displayed on his console. He filled it, in that moment, with the collective will of a galaxy no longer willing to be just a garden. Admiral Revna, he said, his voice carrying the weight of 10,000 cycles of peace and 50 cycles of hell-forged purpose. We are the Council. Our seat was vacant. We have come to fill it. The line held. Not just the human line. The new one, forged in the fires of shared, terrifying purpose. The dam had cracked. But, behind it, the city had armed itself. The quaking had left the Council world. Now, it shook the very foundations of the abyss. Part 5. The battle for the bulwark did not end with a single, glorious charge. It became a grinding, tactical nightmare, a fusion of two alien ways of war. The human fleet, guided by Revna's millennia-honed instinct for survival, fought with savage, unpredictable ferocity. The custodian fleet, directed by the Xenth's cold calculus and the lore's precision, fought with terrifying, elegant efficiency. They were a hammer and a scalpel, wielded in discordant, yet devastating harmony. The first major test was communication. Human calms were bursts of angry poetry and clipped jargon. Council commands were layered subroutines and harmonic frequencies. They couldn't talk to each other in the heat of battle. So, they didn't. Admiral Revna, on the crippled diaspora's fist, began transmitting raw tactical intent, flashes of target priority, vectors of enemy reinforcement, zones of critical vulnerability. The Xenth node aboard the Arbiters will ingested this chaotic data stream, parsed the human combat intuition, and translated it into flawless execution orders for the Council fleet. A human frigate, the last stand, performed a seemingly suicidal thrust into the heart of a Craxi formation to draw fire. The Xenth understood the gambit. It directed 3 lore lancers to a precise point ahead of the frigate's path. As Craxi ships turned to obliterate the last stand, the lancers fired, not at the ships, but at the space between them, creating a resonance field that caused their plasma conduits to backfire. The Craxi squadron tore itself apart from within, and the last stand limped away, its crew staring in stunned silence at their saviors. The learning was mutual. Gelt warriors, boarding a crippled Craxi hive ship in a textbook breach and clear, found themselves pinned by a previously unknown type of acid spitter. A garbled human transmission from a nearby marine platoon, fighting on the bulwark's hull, came through, flashbangs and left. They tracked by scent shock. The Gelt didn't have flashbangs. But the lore on their team had crystalline flare grenades. They adapted. The breach succeeded. Slowly, incredulously, the tide within the bulwark system began to turn. The Craxi and Myrmidon forces, used to the predictable, if fierce, human resistance, were utterly confounded by this new enemy that fought with neither brute force nor fragile honor, but with a kind of chilling, intelligent cruelty they had no counter for. The Myrmidon sworn logic was hacked and turned inward by Xenth viruses. The Craxi's hormonal rage was chemically exacerbated by Veln aerosols, making them attack their own commanders. On the bridge of the Arbiter's Will, Valerius watched as the two fleets, one born of darkness and defiance, the other of light and desperate will, began to move as one organism. A human cruiser would lay down a withering barrage of kinetic fire, not to destroy, but to herd a Craxi battle group into the killing zone of a waiting lore resonance web. It was ugly, brutal, and breathtakingly effective. Admiral Revna's face finally appeared on his main viewer, the connection clearer. She looked older than time, her eyes holding the ghosts of 1,000 lost worlds. But there was a new light in them, a fierce, blazing spark. Arbiter, she said, her voice rough. Your timing is theatrical. We read the final notice, Valerius replied, light patterns flickering with something akin to grim humor. We thought we should answer in person. Your technology, it's magnificent. And horrifying. It was built for peace. We have simply repurposed it. As you repurposed your entire species into a shield. A moment of silence passed between them, a bridge across an abyss of time and sacrifice. We can't thank you, Revna said finally, the words clearly foreign to her. Not yet. This is just one system. The war.